The airport was quiet, almost sterile in its fluorescent glow. My flight didn't leave for another 12 hours. 12 hours of plastic chairs, overpriced sandwiches, and the endless murmur of boarding calls. Outside those glass walls, Singapore stretched into the night. Vivid, electric, alive. And I was stuck here because a transit visa wasn't an option. I'd read about solutions. Hidden deep in a travel forum, buried under legitimate advice, was a link. A dark web marketplace, quality transit visas, all countries, 2-hour delivery. The reviews were impeccable. People detailing seamless entries, perfect forgeries, no issues. It was expensive, sure, but the idea of spending half a day trapped in an airport was worse. £160 in Bitcoin. That was the cost of my freedom. The visa arrived exactly as promised. A high-resolution scan, detailed instructions on which immigration counter to use, what to say, how to carry myself. It felt dodgy, but it also felt easy. Too easy. I printed it in an airport lounge, slipped it into my passport, and walked straight through immigration. The officer barely glanced at it before stamping me through. I spent the evening in the thick of Singapore's neon streets, sat beneath the glowing trees at gardens by the bay, ate char kway teow from a hawker stall, watched the skyline shimmer on the water. Every moment felt stolen, like I'd slipped through reality itself, and no one had stopped me. When I returned to the airport, I was knackered but satisfied. A perfect crime, I thought. Then I saw the frown. The immigration officer scanned my passport again. A slight hesitation, eyes flicking between my face and the screen. Then a quiet murmur into the radio. 2 men arrived. No uniforms, just dark clothes, earpieces, an air of authority that left no room for questions. The walk to the back rooms was silent. The space they led me to was small and featureless, with a single metal table, a camera in the corner, its red light blinking. My passport sat in front of them. My phone, my laptop. The weight stretched on, and the air grew heavier. A document was slid across the table. The visa number didn't exist. The watermark was wrong. The implication was clear. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. The isolation was relentless. Hours passed, the walls pressing in. No water, no food, just the hum of the ventilation system and the occasional footsteps outside. My flight had long since departed without me. Fingerprinting, mugshots, a DNA swab, the weight of an irreversible mistake settling in as the process continued without a word of explanation. The holding cell wasn't a prison, not exactly, but it felt like one. Cold metal bunks, a single toilet, a camera in the corner that never blinked. Other detainees came and went. Some were questioned and released. Others simply disappeared. The absence of answers left too much space for imagination. On the third day, a folder was placed in front of me. Screenshots, dark web messages, Bitcoin transactions, even old forum posts where I'd first asked about fake visas. Every step I thought had been erased was there, documented and undeniable. The expectation was clear. Give them everything. Names, details, patterns. Cooperation might mean less time lost. It didn't matter. They kept me anyway. I'm writing this from a cell in a Singapore detention facility. No charges yet. No trial date. Just waiting. The embassy is investigating. Solicitors are involved. But here, immigration fraud isn't just a crime. It's a threat to national security. Travel will never be the same. Even if released, my passport will trigger alarms at every border. Some countries will deny entry outright. Others will pull me aside, scrutinizing every movement before deciding whether I'm worth the risk. The seller remains, still active, still 5-star reviews, still offering the same services that led me here. And every day down the hall, new voices echo, new detainees arrive, unaware they've walked into the same trap. Some borders aren't meant to be crossed. There are two kinds of mistakes, the kind you can fix and the kind that follow you forever. I made the second kind. 18. Broke and out of options, I turned to the dark web, out of desperation. My prescription refill was over $1,000 without insurance. Money I didn't have. The alternative was simple. Go without and let the pain take over, or find another way. The Tor browser had been running for hours. Darkmed's Plaza, one of the biggest darknet markets. Vendor pages scrolled endlessly across the screen, sterile descriptions mimicking legitimate pharmacy sites. Photos, chemical purity tests, verified customer reviews. It felt like online shopping, but every step required paranoia. Weeks of research had taught me the basics of anonymity, Monero for transactions, PGP encryption for messages, VPNs layered like armor. Every move had to be careful, every keystroke deliberate. The vendor I settled on was called PharmaCorp 247. 4,000 completed orders, a near perfect rating. Every indicator suggested legitimacy. A warning in the vendor's encrypted message had stood out. Never use a home address. A drop point was safer. 2 towns over, a rented UPS mailbox seemed secure enough. The extra fee for professional packaging felt worth it. The order was placed. Then the waiting began. A week later, the package arrived. The pickup was routine. Show ID, sign, leave. No one in the UPS store paid me any attention. The package was small, a bubble-wrapped mailer inside a standard shipping envelope. The return address listed a medical supplier in Nebraska. Everything about it looked normal. The black Honda Civic in the parking lot barely registered at first. Only when it merged onto the highway behind me, turn for turn, did unease settle in. The longer it stayed, the harder it became to ignore. When it matched my exit 40 minutes later, my hands turned slick against the wheel. At 6 miles, when it crept onto my street behind me, my breath had turned shallow. Pulling into the driveway wasn't an option. Instead, I kept going, watching through the rear-view mirror as the Civic idled by my home. 2 people inside, sunglasses, faces obscured. They didn't follow when I turned at the next intersection. For 2 hours, I drove in circles, taking unnecessary detours, doubling back on streets, waiting for the nerves to settle. By the time I finally pulled into my driveway, the adrenaline had drained enough for exhaustion to creep in. The package sat on the kitchen counter, untouched. The label looked perfect. Clean printing, real tracking number. But something gnawed at the edges of my mind. A check wouldn't hurt. The company on the return address existed. But their real location was in Oklahoma, not Nebraska. The screen glowed with a new message in my Tor browser, encrypted. Decrypting it felt like opening a letter you already knew contained bad news. The words were clinical, a suggestion to consider more traditional means of obtaining medication. A mention of amateur mistakes, how a username I thought was anonymous had been linked across multiple platforms. The kind of slip that leaves a footprint someone patient enough could follow. The phone screen lit up next, an unknown number, a message detailing the security vulnerabilities of my home network, a reminder of how easy it was for the wrong person to access private feeds, a brief summary of my house: 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, an office near the front window where I worked. The kind of detail no one should have. The package felt heavier now. Ripping open the outer packaging sent a wave of nausea rolling through my stomach. A small plastic bag fell onto the counter. Inside, 3 identical white pills, markings precise, shape indistinguishable from the real thing. Another message arrived, this time both through Tor and on my phone. The pills weren't what they seemed. They were counterfeit. Pressed fentanyl, 3 doses, each enough to be fatal. The implication was clear. The vendor had been selling them as the real thing. The so-called quality control had intervened. This wasn't law enforcement, not a scam either. Just a silent, invisible force making sure people like me understood the risk. A final warning to stay away. The messages stopped after that, but nothing truly ended. Now, every time a black Civic pulls onto my street, something in my chest tightens. Every time I check the security cameras, I wonder if someone else is watching too. Every time my phone buzzes, the reflex to expect the worst hasn't faded. And every morning, I stare at my dwindling supply of real medication, knowing I can't afford another legal refill. The pain is growing. The choice is becoming clearer. Risk death, or live with it. Somewhere out there, maybe that Civic is still waiting, watching, ready to see if I make the wrong choice again. The laptop screen threw a pale glow across my dining table, illuminating 3 months' worth of evidence I had gathered. Screenshots of fake investment sites, recorded phone calls dripping with rehearsed sincerity, bank statements marking the exact moment my grandmother's retirement fund had vanished into digital ether. The scammer had been meticulous. I would be more so. I had spent weeks searching for the right people, those who knew how to find men like him, how to make them pay. That's how I found the Digital Justice Network. Their landing page read like a manifesto, filled with the rhetoric of ethical hacking, of balance restored through targeted pressure. A price had to be paid to access their services, cryptocurrency, anonymous wallets, but revenge operates on its own economy. At exactly midnight, I submitted my evidence package. The reply came within hours. Package received. Initial analysis promising. Standby for operation parameters. The first sign that something was wrong came the next morning. An email from my bank flagged unusual activity. A series of transactions I had never made. Each one was carefully measured, just low enough to evade automatic fraud detection. I went to log in. My password had been changed. Then came the text. Phase 1 complete. Your digital signature has been properly established. My breath caught in my throat. I switched to my laptop, but before I could even open a browser, the screen began to flicker. New windows appeared, dozens of them, each one displaying a different feed. Security cameras from places I had never been. Bank accounts under my name that I had never opened. Emails I had never written. Conversations I had never participated in. But the worst part wasn't the forgeries. It was that everything looked real. My photo, my name, my fingerprints scattered across transactions, leaving a digital breadcrumb trail I had never set. A new message blinked on my screen. You provided excellent source material. Your attention to detail was impressive. We simply applied your own methodology to a larger canvas. After all, the best frame is built from authentic pieces. I opened the Digital Justice Network's site, fingers shaking as I tried to log back in. The forum thread about my target was gone. In its place, a new discussion. Operation Mirror complete. Subject successfully integrated into existing investigation. The comments scrolled like a slow-motion car crash I couldn't look away from. Perfect profile match. History of financial investigation. Demonstrated capability with digital surveillance. Clear motivation for larger scheme. Digital footprint properly established across all necessary platforms. Temporal alignment achieved with previous incidents. A heavy numbness settled into my chest. This wasn't just identity theft. They had built something with me, around me, ASM. They had turned me into the thing I had been trying to destroy. Notifications flooded my phone. Bank account confirmations, transaction approvals, receipts for purchases I had never made, each one threading a story of someone preparing for something much larger than revenge. Then the final message arrived. Your grandmother's money has been returned with interest. Consider it a consulting fee. You helped us solve a rather pressing problem. We needed someone with your profile, someone whose digital trail would withstand scrutiny when the authorities begin their investigation. The original scammer was just bait. You were the real target all along. Through my window, a pair of black SUVs pulled up across the street. Men in suits stepped out, murmuring into radios, their gazes locked onto my apartment. My laptop screen refreshed on its own. News headlines appeared. Syndicated financial crimes, international fraud operation, multi-million-dollar laundering scheme under investigation. My name wasn't there. Not yet. But I could see its shape in the negative spaces between the words, in the careful breadcrumb trail of evidence I had unknowingly built. The last message arrived, its finality sinking like a blade between my ribs. Every attempt you make to prove your innocence will only reinforce the narrative. After all, you spent months gathering evidence, documenting patterns, building a case. We just helped you do it on a grander scale than you intended. Welcome to the other side of justice. My grandmother's bank account showed the promised restoration. The money sat there, untouched, a full circle, a completed transaction. But it wasn't a resolution. It was a signature, a binding contract I had signed without ever realizing the terms. Outside, the red and blue lights splashed against my walls, their silent rhythm marking the countdown to a story that had already been written. My own. The story of a man who had tried to bring down a thief only to become something far more valuable. A perfect fall guy. People kept telling me to just start over, as if it were that simple. 10 years of memories, my entire photography portfolio, my professional network, my verified status. Losing my Instagram wasn't just an inconvenience, it was like having a part of my life ripped away. Instagram support was useless. Every recovery attempt failed. The hacker had changed everything. Email, phone number, even enabled two-factor authentication. I could only sit there, helpless, as they flooded my account with crypto scams, pushing them out to my 40,000 followers. I refused to let them take it from me. That's when I found Black Hat Recovery on the dark web. Their listing was polished, professional. Account recovery services, 100% success rate, money-back guarantee. The reviews all said the same thing: fast, discreet, effective. The price was steep, £1,200 in Bitcoin, but it was worth it. 1 month of sponsored posts would cover it. I'd never used the dark web before. The process felt wrong. The URLs were a mess of random letters and numbers, pages loaded sluggishly, and everything carried the eerie weight of a place that shouldn't be found. But desperation makes you ignore red flags when they look like solutions. I followed the instructions, installed Tor, bought Bitcoin, sent a message. The response came instantly. They needed access to my device to run their recovery tools, a secure client, a temporary connection, just long enough to get my account back. The software looked legitimate, no antivirus warnings, a clean, professional interface. I installed it, watched as the command window flickered across my screen. They said it would take 2 hours. At hour 3, my laptop rebooted, and then everything started falling apart. It began with notifications. Unusual login detected, password changed, new device added, Gmail, Facebook, Apple. Then the Wi-Fi dropped. My router had been wiped. No networks were available. I reached for my phone. No service. My carrier displayed no account found. I borrowed my roommate's laptop, opened my banking app, invalid credentials. I typed in my account number manually. Account not found. That didn't make sense. I had money in that account. Direct deposits, savings, bills on autopay. There was no way it could be gone. I called customer service, my hands shaking as I entered my details. After several long minutes, the response came back. They had no record of me. Not my name, not my account, not my history. I wasn't just locked out. I didn't exist in their system. Panic set in. I checked my email. Every account was gone. I tried logging into my university portal. Student not found. My cloud storage was empty. Even my credit report was blank. No records available. It wasn't just my Instagram. Everything digital about me had been erased. At the bank, I argued with the teller, gripping a printed statement I'd saved months ago. The account number came up as invalid. Their system had no history of me ever being a customer. The university was even worse. My student ID wouldn't scan. My name didn't show up in their database. The registrar's office pulled up the records, checking manually. Nothing. No transcripts, no grades, no proof that I'd ever attended. Even my NHS login wouldn't work. At the GP's office, they searched for my patient file. No records found. My prescription history, my vaccinations, my medical past, gone. I left the office in a daze, the weight of something I couldn't even process pressing down on me. That night, my roommate found something on his laptop, a new post on the same dark web marketplace where I'd found Black Hat recovery. Thanks for the access. Digital identity completely cleared. Now available for sale. Below it, another message. For the original owner, everything can be restored for 20 Bitcoin. Timer starts now. In 72 hours, it's gone forever. The listing detailed my life, financial history, medical records, academic credentials, even my verified social media presence. The price for recovery was nearly £800,000. They hadn't just stolen my identity, they'd put it up for auction. And in a world where everything runs on digital records, without those records, I was nothing. I shouldn't have kept the laptop. If I had known what it contained, what I would become part of, I would have walked away. But I didn't. It was just another item at a police auction, sold in bulk, with other refurbished government machines. Officially wiped, factory reset, nothing left but a fresh install of Windows. At least, that was the assumption. The first time I powered it on, it ran smoothly. No lingering files, no traces of its past. I set it up on my desk, plugged in my peripherals, and went about my usual routine. It wasn't until I adjusted the power cable that I noticed something almost flush against the back panel, barely visible beneath the dim glow of my desk lamp. A USB drive, wedged so deep into the port that it looked like an afterthought, forgotten or abandoned. There was no branding, no markings, just a matte black piece of plastic that seemed deliberately unremarkable. Curiosity got the better of me. I plugged it in, half expecting it to be corrupted or empty. There was only one file inside, P047_evidence_log.anc, encrypted and unreadable. That should have been enough of a deterrent, a sign to leave it alone, to remove the drive and forget I had ever seen it. But the label intrigued me. Evidence log suggested something valuable, something important enough to be hidden behind encryption. Instead of doing the reasonable thing and turning it in, I started searching for ways to unlock it. Conventional methods got me nowhere. The typical file cracking software couldn't break through, and every surface level forum I visited offered no real solutions. Eventually, after hours of digging, I came across a dark web community focused on data recovery and encryption exploits. It was a place where lost files, forgotten passwords, and corrupted drives could be salvaged for a price. The process felt seamless. A request submitted, an anonymous transaction completed, and a promise that the decrypted file would be returned within 48 hours. When it arrived, I hesitated before opening it. The folder contained a series of documents, crime scene records, forensic analysis, partial email headers, a collection of images and text files. The evidence log was from an active police case, Case P047, a missing persons investigation tied to Sandra Chen, a real estate agent who had vanished the previous March. The name wasn't unfamiliar. I remembered seeing her face on the news, a grainy CCTV still of her walking into a property late at night, never seen again. Publicly, the case had gone cold. No suspects, no leads, nothing beyond speculation. But the police files told a different story. A crime scene photo showed her computer screen frozen on an open email. The last message she had read was from an anonymous sender inquiring about a house viewing late in the evening. The logs revealed that this sender had reached out multiple times under different aliases, contacting agents across different cities with the same request. The emails weren't random. They followed a pattern. Other case numbers were listed in the file, each corresponding to a missing real estate agent who had disappeared under eerily similar circumstances. There were no official conclusions in the reports, only a single notation. The pattern suggested a serial offender. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through recovered data, recognizing fragments of deleted emails, server traces, attempts to mask digital footprints. Whoever this was, they had been operating for years, targeting individuals in a way that left no witnesses, no evidence beyond the vanished bodies of those who had agreed to late-night showings. The information should have been locked within police databases, but somehow it had ended up buried on a discarded USB drive inside a second-hand laptop. The unease creeping over me solidified into something much worse when I checked my inbox later that night. Among the usual junk and subscriptions, an email with no sender information sat at the top. There was no subject line, no context, only the timestamp marking it as freshly received. The body of the message contained a single line referencing the exact name of the decrypted file I had opened. The implications settled in my stomach like a dead weight. Someone knew I had accessed the log. Someone was watching. I shut the laptop and paced the length of my apartment, convincing myself it was nothing more than an automated warning, some forgotten security measure embedded in the files. The rationalization held until my phone buzzed on the counter. Another email. The message was longer this time, written with an unsettling precision that left no room for misinterpretation. The laptop should never have been in the auction. The USB drive should never have left the evidence locker. Some things weren't meant to be found. I turned off every device in my apartment. But paranoia had already taken hold. The walls felt too thin, the windows too exposed. I replayed the events in my head, tracing every step back to the moment I had plugged in the drive, trying to pinpoint exactly when I had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. When my phone buzzed again, I didn't want to look. A third message waited for me, accompanied by an attachment. The photo showed my front door. The timestamp indicated it had been taken less than a minute ago. Adrenaline surged through me, but my body locked up. The apartment was silent, the door still latched, no movement beyond the faint hum of the refrigerator. Outside, a car idled at the end of the street, barely visible beyond the curtain's edge. I forced myself to stay still, not to react, not to confirm that I had seen them. My phone vibrated again. Another email sliding into my inbox. The message was clear. The USB drive needed to be returned. The instructions were simple. Place it in an unmarked envelope, send it to the address provided, and everything would be forgotten. A refusal would mean consequences. The next morning, I followed the instructions exactly. I packed the drive, addressed the envelope, and dropped it into a mailbox without looking back. The laptop went into storage, untouched since that night. But forgetting isn't as easy as they made it sound. Months later, another real estate agent's name surfaced in the news. Same circumstances, same unexplained disappearance. The emails were still going out, still luring people into empty houses under the guise of a client inquiry. The paranoia hasn't faded. Every unknown number that flashes across my screen makes my pulse spike. Every time I hear footsteps behind me, I wonder if I've been marked as something more than just an accidental witness. I thought returning the drive would be the end of it. Now, I'm not so sure, because someone is still out there, still working through their list. The moment I saw the message, I felt my stomach drop. I should have known better. That thought kept hammering through my head, but it was too late now. I had already sent the photo. I had already made the mistake. It started, like most bad ideas, at 3 a.m. The dorm was quiet. The glow of my laptop, the only light in the room. My roommate was out for the weekend, and I should have been studying for midterms, but instead, I was scrolling through a dark web marketplace, searching for a fake ID. Just a stupid way to get into Club Azure. Nothing sinister. I had followed every security step from the Reddit thread. VPN active, Tor browser running, temporary email setup. I wasn't an idiot. I knew how to cover my tracks. The listing was buried among dozens of others, but something about it caught my eye. Premium IDs, 99.9% pass rate, £75 special. The price was suspiciously low, but the reviews were glowing. Every post sounded like a real person, not the usual bot-generated nonsense. Username, Cardinal Service, response time, under 2 hours. I clicked the chat link. Fast turnaround guaranteed, they wrote back almost instantly. Just need a clear selfie against a white wall and basic details. No haggling, no verification questions, just straight to business. I was too excited to question it. I stood against my dorm's white wall, snapped a quick selfie, and sent it over. 3 minutes later, a new message appeared, but not from Cardinal Service, from someone else. Madison Wheeler, room 412, Preston Hall. Nice view of the campus garden from your window. I stopped breathing. I hadn't given them my real name, or my dorm room number. My hands felt cold as I reread the message, my brain racing through possibilities. Maybe it was a scare tactic. Maybe they'd linked my email to an old account, scraped some forgotten profile. But then another message appeared. Your Instagram is pretty active for someone so concerned about privacy, especially those stories from last weekend. Does your scholarship board know about the underage drinking? Your parents? The university? Attached was a photo, a picture of me, sitting at my desk, taken from outside my window. I turned slowly. The window was shut, curtains half drawn, the campus below quiet, and empty. My dorm was 4 stories up. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Don't bother closing them now. We have what we need. £5,000 by tomorrow midnight, or everyone sees everything, including some angles you haven't noticed yet. I wanted to believe it was a prank, some elaborate joke designed to mess with desperate college kids. But I knew better. The photo wasn't from earlier. It wasn't from last night. It was from right now. I yanked the cord from my laptop, my hands shaking as I slammed it shut. My mind raced through explanations. Maybe a drone, maybe a long-range lens, but none of them changed the reality of the situation. Someone was watching me right now. I turned off my phone. It didn't matter. They had already gotten what they wanted. I sat in the dark for what felt like hours, barely breathing, staring at the window. Every passing shadow from the streetlights made my pulse spike. Every creak in the walls felt deliberate. At some point, I must have fallen asleep. When I woke up, the room was silent, the laptop still shut, my phone face down on the desk. I hesitated before reaching for it, dread curling in my stomach. One new message. Smart choice, but we'll be in touch. I never told anyone. What could I say? That I tried to buy a fake ID and got targeted by a blackmailer with god-tier surveillance skills. That someone, somewhere, had been collecting pieces of my life, just waiting for me to slip up. I wiped my laptop that day. Factory reset my phone. Deleted every social media account I had. But I knew it wouldn't change anything. Because sometimes I still get texts from unknown numbers. No threats, no demands, just little things. A photo of my new apartment building. A screenshot of my class schedule. A message sent at exactly 3 a.m. Still being careful? Madison? I don't use the internet the same way anymore. I don't take selfies. I don't post anything personal, anywhere. And every night, before I go to sleep, I check the locks. I close the curtains, but I still see them sometimes. The flashes, the faint movements in the shadows outside my window. I tell myself, it's nothing. But deep down, I know the truth. They never really left. The first charge appeared on my bank statement 3 days after the money arrived. It was small, £12.99 to a company I didn't recognize, something called DGTL, Services Limited. At first, it barely registered. I assumed it was a subscription I'd forgotten about, something I'd signed up for months ago and failed to cancel. The amount was too low to seem worth chasing. A minor annoyance, nothing more. But 3 days later, another charge appeared. Then another. £27.50 to Financial Processing Solutions. £44.99 to Premier Digital Ventures. Each time, the name was different. The amounts slightly varied. None of them were large enough to trigger an immediate panic, but something about them didn't sit right. They weren't the usual sort of fraud charges. No sudden massive transactions. No obvious red flags. If I hadn't been watching my account closely, I might not have noticed at all. And that was the point. They had designed it that way. It had started with a moment of desperation. I needed £2,500 to cover rent until my new job started, but every lender I tried had refused me. My credit had been ruined by medical bills. My overdraft was maxed out, and I had exhausted every option that didn't involve begging friends or family for help. Then I found a listing buried deep in a dark web marketplace, a lending service called Fast Cash Direct. They didn't run credit checks. Approval was instant. The website was polished, more professional than half the mainstream lenders I had looked at. There was a secure login, a live chat for customer support, and a terms and conditions page that seemed thorough, if unreadably dense. I had convinced myself that it was a hidden gem, the kind of service the banks didn't want people to know about. The application process had been effortless. A few basic details, a connection to my bank account for verification, and within minutes, the funds had been deposited. The money had felt like a miracle when it arrived, a temporary lifeline that would carry me through to my first proper paycheck. The interest rate had been steep, 30%, but I had reassured myself that it was a short-term issue. 2 weeks, and it would be repaid in full. I had been relieved. I had even felt lucky. I had been a fool. When the charges continued, I logged into my bank's security settings and changed my password. A few hours later, I tried logging in again, only to find that my password had been reverted to its original state. I activated two-factor authentication, but when I attempted to use it, the system told me it had been disabled. I called my bank and requested a freeze on the account. They assured me it was secure. By the time I checked again, the freeze had been lifted. That was the moment the real fear set in. Every attempt to cut them off was met with an invisible hand that undid my efforts as quickly as I made them. They weren't stealing from me in the usual way. They weren't forcing withdrawals or using cloned cards. They had taken something more fundamental than that. They had taken control. When my first paycheck from the new job was deposited, $1,923.44, it disappeared within hours, piece by piece, in increments that seemed small, harmless, easily dismissed. I refreshed my banking app again and again, watching the number drop, watching my money slip away in real time, helpless to stop it. There was no dramatic moment of discovery, no clear evidence of a single catastrophic theft, just a slow, steady drip feed of losses, engineered to bypass fraud alerts, designed to go unnoticed for as long as possible. I searched for Fast Cash Direct again, hoping to find some kind of customer service, some way to dispute the charges. The website was gone. In its place was a near identical copy under a new name, advertising the same promises to a new set of desperate borrowers. I tried contacting my bank, but they told me the transactions had been authorized. I had willingly provided my details after all. They had no way to prove that I hadn't approved each deduction myself. The police were no help either. The names of the companies draining my account were real, at least on the surface. Each had a website, a listed address, a contact email, but none of them led anywhere. The moment one was shut down, another took its place. I combed through the contract I had signed, scouring the fine print I had barely glanced at before. Buried deep within layers of legal jargon, I found the truth. I hadn't borrowed £2,500. I had sold them access to my bank account. The money they had sent me had never been a loan. It had been a payment, an upfront sum in exchange for what they were about to take. The interest rate wasn't 30% annually. It was 30% of every deposit I would ever receive. There was no end date, no repayment plan, just a clause that granted them continuous withdrawal rights in perpetuity from any account I held. I tried to open a new account at a different bank, but every application was rejected. Whatever they had done, whatever invisible flag they had placed on my records, it followed me. I was locked out of the financial system, trapped inside an account I no longer controlled. The withdrawals never stopped. £89.99 to secure transaction systems. £115.50 to digital payment solutions. £167.25 to e-finance processors limited. Each charge looked legitimate, each name linked to a professional-looking website that led nowhere. There was nothing I could do but watch. The money continued to disappear, siphoned off in dozens of tiny increments, too small to be worth a dispute, too frequent to ignore. Months passed. My wages landed in my account for mere moments before being drained away. My rent fell behind. My bills defaulted. My landlord didn't care about the details. The electricity company didn't care about the fraud. The water bill still needed paying. None of them were interested in the fact that my money was being taken from me the second it arrived. I gave up fighting it. The numbers dropped lower every week, my bank balance shrinking in a way that felt like a slow, methodical execution. My financial life had become a wound that never closed, bleeding out in microtransactions. The only thing worse than seeing the money vanish was knowing that there was nothing I could do to stop it. Somewhere, buried deep in the dark web, they were still collecting, still taking their share, not in huge, obvious amounts, but in careful, measured doses, just enough to keep it going, just enough to keep me trapped. And they would never stop, not until there was nothing left. I should have thrown the box away the moment I saw it. It was a Monday afternoon when the package arrived, wrapped in plain brown paper, no return address, just my name, Marcus Chen, written in a hand that wavered uneasily between cursive and print, as though the writer couldn't decide which version of themselves they wanted to present. I hadn't expected it so soon. The marketplace listing had estimated 2 to 3 weeks, but it had been barely 5 days since I placed the order. Maybe that should have been my first warning. I had been searching for the perfect prank gift, something to mess with my roommate Alex, who had a borderline obsessive love for vintage dolls. Our apartment was filled with them, glassy-eyed relics propped on shelves, their cracked porcelain faces catching the afternoon light in ways that made my skin crawl. So, when I stumbled across a dark web listing for an authentically cursed Victorian mourning doll, I thought it was perfect. The seller's photos had shown a grotesque little thing, dressed in tattered lace, its once white dress stained with time, its dead blue eyes looking just slightly off in every picture, as if they had shifted between shots. It was exactly the kind of unsettling antique Alex would love. But the box in my hands felt too light, almost empty. I peeled away the brown paper and frowned. The cardboard box beneath it was sealed with clear packing tape. but something about the edges caught my eye. A slight discoloration, as though the tape had been carefully removed and reapplied. My stomach tightened. Inside, crumpled newspaper filled the space where the doll should have been, and nestled on top of it was a small white envelope and a cheap plastic baby doll, the kind you'd find in the clearance bin at a toy store. Not the antique I ordered, not even close. I hesitated before picking up the envelope. It felt heavier than paper should. With a growing sense of unease, I slid my finger under the flap and pulled out a stack of glossy photographs. The first one stopped me cold. It was me, sitting at my desk, illuminated by the glow of my laptop, my face reflected faintly in the screen. I recognized the moment. It was from the night I had placed the order. The second, me, asleep, on the couch. The timestamp in the corner was from 3 nights ago. My fingers trembled as I flipped to the next. Me, on my laptop, reading the listing for the haunted doll. The photo was taken from an angle that shouldn't have been possible, directly over my shoulder, as if someone had been standing behind me. I could barely swallow. The final photo wasn't of me at all. It was of Alex's dolls, perfectly arranged on their usual shelf, except they weren't in their usual positions. In the photo, every single one was turned toward my bedroom door. The timestamp read, "Tonight, 2 a.m. I stared at the image, my pulse pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The note was at the bottom of the stack, written in the same peculiar handwriting that had spelled out my name on the package. You wanted something haunted. Consider your wish granted. Thanks for the Bitcoin and for leaving your webcam uncovered." A beat of silence. Then my phone vibrated against the counter. A text from Alex. "Hey, running late at work. Don't wait up. Also, did you move my dolls? They seem different somehow." My breath came in shallow gasps as I turned, eyes darting toward the shelf. In the fading afternoon light, their glass faces stared forward in perfect stillness, and yet something felt wrong. A tiny shift, an imperceptible difference that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Then I saw it. Tiny, nearly invisible holes, nestled deep in the pupils of their eyes. Not antique glass, cameras, every single doll. Dozens of them, arranged neatly on the shelf, watching me. My hands went cold. I turned the plastic doll over in my hands, its mass-produced face suddenly far less innocent. And there, hidden beneath the molded plastic folds of its back, I found it. A small USB port. Next to it, a blinking red light. It was still recording. I stumbled backward, my mind a frantic mess of questions I didn't want the answers to. How long had they been watching? Who was watching? And most terrifying of all, where else had they placed cameras? The apartment, once familiar and safe, suddenly felt like a cage. My every movement, every breath, every private moment, I had given them everything, because I had clicked a link, because I had thought I was the one playing the joke. The worst part wasn't the invasion of privacy. It wasn't the blackmail, or even the sick satisfaction that some faceless voyeur was getting from this. It was the knowledge that someone had been in here. Someone had stood in this room, arranged these dolls, embedded these cameras, and walked out unseen. and they could come back any time they wanted. The last of the sunlight vanished beyond the window, casting the room into deepening shadows. My phone vibrated again. Another message from an unknown number. Hope you like the gift. Keep the dolls. They're part of the experience. I dropped my phone, heart hammering. My reflection in the dark screen of my laptop showed only my wide, horrified eyes. And behind me, in the reflection, the shelf of dolls stood sentinel, watching. I still don't know how they got her out of the apartment without a sound. That thought lingers even now, years later, whenever I lie awake at night, staring at the dark corners of my room, wondering how many other things go unseen until it's too late. It was a little after 1 a.m. when I clicked the link, alone in my bedroom, my laptop's blue glow, the only thing cutting through the darkness. The apartment was quiet, just the low hum of the fridge in the kitchen and the distant sound of a siren somewhere in the city. I wasn't supposed to be awake. I wasn't supposed to be on that website. But the post-it note had been sitting on the counter all night. The URL scrawled in Kai's handwriting beneath the words, Midnight Gallery, private stream. I hadn't planned on checking it out, but something about it kept tugging at my mind. A quiet insistence that had grown stronger as the hours crept past. Kai had mentioned it earlier that evening, sliding the note toward me with a smirk, his voice edged with the kind of reckless enthusiasm that came from too many drinks and the need to impress. Super exclusive, underground art shit. You'll love it. I had barely paid attention at the time, dismissing it as just another one of his late-night deep dives into weird internet subcultures. But now, alone in the silence, curiosity had won. I typed the URL into my browser and was met with a black screen and a single login prompt. I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the keys, before entering the code from the note. The page refreshed instantly, the stream loading without hesitation. At first, it was nothing special, a dimly lit studio, the kind you'd expect from an experimental artist. Concrete walls, a single wooden chair in the center, track lighting casting harsh shadows along the floor. The space was empty, the camera perfectly still, as if waiting for something. A chat window scrolled rapidly along the side of the screen, messages flashing by in different languages, usernames blending together in a blur of cryptic commentary. The viewer count held steady at 207. A message appeared from the host, a user named Gallery Guide. Tonight's piece, Confined Spaces. I almost laughed at how pretentious it all seemed. The kind of thing art students would throw together and call profound. But before I could close the tab, the studio door opened and someone stepped inside. The figure was dressed in all black, hood up, gloves covering their hands, their face obscured in shadow. They moved with deliberate precision, adjusting the camera slightly, making sure the frame was just right. Then they stepped back, and another figure entered. This one stumbled. Their hands were bound behind their back. A bag covered their head. I felt a tightness in my chest, a discomfort that had nothing to do with the late hour or the glow of the screen. It had to be staged, I told myself, a performance piece, some kind of social experiment meant to provoke a reaction. But something was wrong. The way the bound figure moved was too unsteady, too uncertain. Their body language filled with a tension that didn't feel rehearsed. The person in black reached forward, gripping the bag and pulling it off with a single, smooth motion. For a moment, I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. The details registered one by one. The dark hair, the pale skin, the familiar green sweater, slightly frayed at the left cuff. I had been there when she bought that sweater last winter. I knew it because it belonged to Maya. She was sitting in that chair, wrists zip-tied to the armrests, a gag tied tightly over her mouth. Her mascara was smeared, her eyes wide, darting frantically around the room, and then stopping, locking onto the camera, locking onto me. My brain refused to catch up with reality. My first thought was that it had to be a mistake, that it had to be a pre-recorded video, something old, something staged. But then I saw the timestamp in the corner of the stream. Live. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone, fumbling to open our group chat. The last message from Maya was 3 hours ago. Heading to bed. Too much vodka. Don't let me sleep through my interview tomorrow. She was supposed to be here, in the apartment, asleep in her room, just down the hall. I pushed away from my desk so fast that my chair tipped over, hitting the floor with a dull thud. The apartment was completely silent, except for the ragged sound of my own breathing. I rushed down the hallway, my phone's flashlight bouncing off the walls. Her door was closed. My pulse pounded in my ears as I grabbed the handle and shoved it open. The bed was empty. The covers were thrown back, as if she had just stepped away, but her phone was still on the nightstand, the screen dark and undisturbed. Next to it, neatly placed, was another post-it note. The same handwriting. The same URL. But as I stared at it, dread settled deep into my bones, because something about the handwriting was off. It looked like Kai's, almost, but the letters were just a little too neat, a little too controlled, like someone had carefully studied his style and replicated it. My stomach twisted. Someone else had written this note. Someone had left it here, knowing I would find it. I backed out of the room, my breath coming in short, uneven gasps. In my own room, my laptop screen was still glowing, the stream still running. The masked figure had stepped closer now, as if acknowledging me directly. The chat was alive with messages. She's checking the room. Oh, this is great. Let's see how long it takes her. My phone vibrated violently in my hand, a new message appearing from an unknown number. The best art makes the audience feel something. Do you feel it yet? A chill ran through me as I turned toward the hallway, toward the door that led out of the apartment. And for the first time, I realized something I hadn't noticed before. The lock was still latched. The deadbolt was still in place. No one had broken in. They hadn't needed to. They had already been here. My skin felt too tight, my pulse hammering in my ears as I backed away from the door, from the walls, from the creeping realization that every moment of the last few months, the late night conversations, the parties, the nights spent in the living room with the others, had been part of something much bigger than me. And in my bedroom, the live stream continued. the masked figure, watching, waiting, as the viewer count ticked upward. There's a certain kind of horror that only hits when it feels personal. You can watch all the disturbing movies in the world, sift through the darkest corners of the internet, and convince yourself that nothing really unsettles you. But when the fear is about you, your life, your habits, your most private moments, there's nowhere left to hide. I used to think I had seen it all. My obsession with extreme horror had numbed me to the usual shock tactics. Films that made other people turn away in disgust barely fazed me anymore. I spent years chasing the next threshold, digging through obscure forums in search of something real, something that could make me feel genuine fear again. That's what I told myself when I downloaded the file. It was buried in a private torrent group, passed around by users who spoke in cryptic messages about lost cinema and forbidden cuts. The title was unremarkable, Homecoming Final Cut.mp4. The description was vague, just a single sentence, confiscated from a private estate, not meant for public viewing. Perfect. The file wasn't large. It downloaded in seconds. I opened it without hesitation, my apartment bathed in the pale blue glow of my monitor. The walls around me, decorated with carefully framed horror posters, felt smaller, somehow, like they were pressing in. The vintage Dario Argento print above my desk, one of my most prized possessions, caught the light in a way that made the painted eyes seem almost wet. The video started abruptly, no opening credits, no introduction, just a still shot of a suburban home, the camera lingering too long, as if memorizing every detail. The timestamp in the corner read, September 15th, 2023. Recent. The next shot moved inside. The person holding the camera moved with practiced ease, navigating the rooms as if they had done it many times before. The walls were lined with framed family photos, but something about them was off. The faces had been deliberately blurred, as if someone had gone through each picture and erased their identities one by one. Then the camera reached a bedroom. Something about the bedding struck me first, a familiar pattern of geometric shapes in muted blues and greys. The camera tilted upward, revealing a crack in the ceiling paint just above the bed. On the nightstand, a book sat open, a bookmark protruding exactly 1 inch from the top. The book was mine. The bedding was mine. The room was mine. My breath hitched as the figure in the bed shifted in sleep, rolling slightly toward the camera. My mind struggled to reject what I was seeing, but there was no mistaking it. It was me. I was watching a recording of myself sleeping. A fresh wave of nausea hit as the timestamp flickered, cycling backward through different nights, different angles, all from inside my bedroom. Some were shot from the foot of the bed, others from just inside the doorway. The perspective changed, but the subject was always the same. Mr. Unaware. The footage spanned weeks, different nights, different clothes, different positions in bed. Some shots were steady and distant. Others were close, lingering just inches from my face as I slept. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You always looked so peaceful, almost ashamed to wake you. I froze. The video continued, the timestamps catching up to the present, each second bringing it closer to now. The most recent recording ended at 2:17 a.m. I checked my clock. It was 2:24. The realization hit like a punch to the stomach. Whoever filmed this had been in my room less than 10 minutes ago. I scrambled for my phone, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Another message arrived before I could dial. You kept watching. That's good. Means you understand now. My laptop speakers crackled. The video was still playing. The timestamp had changed again. 2:24 a.m. Right now. The screen showed my room exactly as it was in that moment. Same dim lighting, same angle, but the bed was empty. The sheets were pushed back. The only movement was the slow, deliberate pan of the camera, shifting toward the closet. My closet. My stomach twisted as the camera moved closer. The door was open just a fraction of an inch, enough to see the darkness inside. The footage stopped at the closet door, holding there, waiting. I turned slowly, my breath caught in my throat. The closet door was open exactly the same amount as it was on screen. I wasn't alone. The floor beneath my feet felt unsteady as I forced myself to move. My body was screaming to run, to get out now, but I needed to see. My hand shook as I reached forward, grabbed the edge of the door, and yanked it open. The closet was empty. No camera, no intruder. Just my own reflection in the mirror mounted to the inside of the door, my face pale and drenched in sweat. But as my breathing slowed, I noticed something else, something far worse. Behind me, in the dim reflection of my room, a single object stood out among the familiar shapes. On my desk, nestled among my framed posters, a tiny black lens peeked out from inside the painted eye of my Argento print. A hidden camera. I backed away, my pulse hammering, and that's when I heard it. A faint mechanical whir, the unmistakable sound of a camera lens adjusting focus. My phone buzzed, one last time. Now we can begin. I don't remember much of what happened next. I tore the poster from the wall, shattered my laptop screen with my fists, ripped through every inch of my apartment searching for more cameras, more proof of whatever nightmare I had stepped into. But the damage was already done. They had been watching me for weeks. They had been inside my apartment. And somewhere, out there, someone was still watching. There's a particular kind of horror that doesn't hit you all at once. It doesn't shock you, doesn't scream in your face. Instead, it seeps into your bones, slowly, like ink bleeding through paper. You don't even realize how deep it's gone until it's too late. That's what the dark web does to you. I had been browsing it for years, always careful, always controlled. I wasn't interested in drugs or stolen credit cards. What I wanted was media, the kind of underground footage that wasn't meant for public eyes. Lost films, banned documentaries, and occasionally the kind of extreme horror that blurred the line between fiction and reality. I used to think I was just an observer. That was before I found the file. It wasn't linked in any obvious place. No marketplace, no well-known forum. It came as a private message from a user I didn't recognize. Lethal frame. The message was brief, for collectors only. no re-uploads. Attached was a single magnet link, no description, no details, just a file name, Homecoming Final Cut, .mp4. It was 47.2 gigabytes, way too big for typical found footage, but that only made me more interested. I ran it through a sandbox first. No malware, no trackers, just raw video. Safe, at least on the surface. I should have stopped there. The footage began without any introduction. No title screen, no credits, just a static shot of a house. A normal suburban home, indistinct and forgettable, but the way the camera lingered on it made me uneasy. Like someone was memorizing every detail. A timestamp in the corner read 2:37 a.m. I thought I knew what this was. A break-in video, maybe. Those circulated sometimes. Burglars recording themselves. Home invasions filmed for sick entertainment. But something about this was different. The camera moved inside. Whoever was holding it wasn't stumbling or exploring. They moved like they knew the place. The way they navigated the hallway. How they turned each corner without hesitation. It was methodical, practiced. I watched as they approached a bedroom. Something about the room struck me as familiar. The bed, the layout, the objects on the desk. Then the camera panned, and my stomach twisted. The laptop in the video was on. The screen's glow cast a faint reflection, just enough to reveal a face staring at it. My face. I froze. I wasn't watching some random break-in. This was my apartment, and the person sleeping in the bed. It was me. My hands went numb as I stared at the screen, at myself, completely unaware, curled up under the blankets. The timestamp flickered. Kala 2:39. That was only minutes ago. My phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. Watching yourself from the outside is a rare experience, isn't it? I stopped breathing. The video kept playing. The camera angle shifted, moving closer. The lens focused on my sleeping face, lingering on the slow rise and fall of my breath. Then it panned to the side, toward my closet. The door was open, just a crack, exactly the way it was now. My blood went cold. Another text. That part always gets a reaction. I turned slowly, my entire body rigid. The closet stood in the same eerie stillness as in the video, the gap between the doorframe and the darkness inside unchanged. My mind was screaming at me to move, to get out. But I couldn't. I forced myself to reach for something heavy, a book, anything. My fingers trembled as I stepped toward the door. My breath caught in my throat. The footage on my screen mirrored my movement exactly, like I was retracing steps I hadn't taken yet. I yanked the door open. Nothing. No one inside. Just my own reflection in the mirror, mounted on the back of the door. My face pale, my pupils wide. Then I noticed something else. Something blinking, tucked into the corner, barely visible against the shadows, was a tiny black camera. I stumbled back, my heart slamming against my ribs. I reached for it with shaking hands, ripping it free from its hidden mount. It was no bigger than a button, the kind of surveillance equipment you'd find in high-end security systems or black market spy gear. Another text. You've archived so much. We thought it was time to add you to the collection. The air in my apartment felt different now, heavier, occupied. I scanned the room, my vision darting to every possible hiding place. The vents, the bookshelves, the small gaps behind furniture. How many cameras were there? How long had they been here? Another text. Don't bother looking for them all. You'll never find every angle. I wanted to run, but run where? If they had cameras, they had my address, my schedule. They had been inside while I slept, moving through my space as easily as I move through my own routine. They knew everything. I grabbed my laptop, yanked the power cord, and slammed the lid shut. My phone followed. I stuffed clothes into a backpack, grabbed my wallet, and was out the door in less than 2 minutes. I didn't care where I was going. I just had to go. I didn't stop until I was in a hotel an hour outside the city, paid for in cash. I sat in the dim room, staring at the peeling wallpaper, trying to process everything. Then my phone vibrated, one last time. A final text. You can run, but collectors always track their inventory. I threw the phone across the room. It didn't matter. They didn't need it anymore. They had been watching long before I ever found the video. Desperation makes you do things you swore you never would. I had spent weeks ignoring final notices, letting emails pile up, avoiding calls from numbers I recognized but had no answer for. The eviction notice sat on the table in front of me, printed on blue paper, as if the color softened the fact that I had less than 2 weeks before I lost the apartment. I scrolled through job listings well past midnight, the glow of my laptop screen the only light in the room, illuminating the pile of unpaid bills and empty food containers cluttering my kitchen counter. Legitimate jobs wouldn't pay fast enough. The gigs that did, contract work, under-the-table labor, were either unavailable or offering pennies. I needed thousands, and I needed them now. That was the only reason I found myself clicking through the darker corners of the internet, venturing into dark web forums I had never used before. The job listing sat between cryptocurrency scams and phishing schemes, its wording simple but deliberate. Independent courier service, £5,000 per route, discretion required. The pay made my stomach tighten. $5,000 for a single route, 3 deliveries, and I would be in the clear, able to breathe again. I hovered over the listing, hesitating. It was obvious this wasn't legal work. No company name, no details beyond a vague description. But the desperation gnawed at me, made me ignore the alarms ringing in the back of my mind as I clicked through. The application was strangely professional. A secure chat opened immediately, prompting me to answer questions about my driving record, my reliability, my willingness to follow instructions. They never asked for my name. There was no paperwork, no contract, just a final message. Your first route begins tomorrow. Check your mailbox at 6 a.m. Follow the instructions. Do not open the packages. Do not deviate from the schedule. It should have felt like a scam. Maybe it was. But when I checked my banking app, there was already a deposit, half up front, a taste of what I could make if I followed through. My hesitation evaporated. At 6 the next morning, the package was exactly where they said it would be. A padded envelope, plain brown paper, no markings except for a small red sticker on one side. It was heavier than I expected, and when I tilted it, something inside shifted slightly, settling in an unnatural way. I didn't let myself dwell on it. My phone vibrated with an incoming text, a new number I didn't recognize. Drop 1. Storage Unit B, 206, 7:15 a.m. Don't be early. Don't be late. The facility was on the outskirts of town, mostly abandoned except for a few rusting cars and the occasional tenant slipping in and out unnoticed. I arrived precisely on time, pulling into the long row of identical units, my breath visible in the morning cold. Unit B206 was already unlocked. As soon as I stepped out of the car, the door rolled up, revealing a man standing in the shadows. His face was hard to read, the kind of sharp features that made him look older than he probably was, like his skin had settled into permanent tension. He didn't speak, just stepped forward and took the package from my hands, his grip too firm, his eyes flicking past me to the license plate on my car before he stepped back into the unit. The door came down smoothly, without a sound. My phone vibrated. Drop confirmed. Proceed to next stop. The second location was an apartment complex downtown, the kind that had security doors and buzzers, but the instructions were specific. Use the side entrance, 9th floor, unit 914. I expected trouble getting in, but the side entrance was propped open with a folded newspaper. The elevator smelled like old coffee and disinfectant, and when I knocked on the apartment door, it opened just enough for a frail hand to reach out. An elderly woman stood in the dim light, her fingers trembling as she took the package. She barely looked at me, her eyes darting toward the hallway behind me before she whispered, almost too softly to hear, "Be careful, dear." I turned, instinct tightening my chest, but the hallway was empty. Nothing but closed doors and a distant hum of traffic filtering in through the windows. Yet something felt off. As I stepped back toward the elevator, I heard footsteps, light, deliberate, somewhere just out of sight. My phone buzzed. Drop confirmed. Proceed to next stop. The final address led me to the suburbs, a house that looked so perfectly maintained it felt staged. The grass was cut at precise angles, the porch spotless, the windows gleaming. The only flaw was a single dead rose bush near the front steps, brittle and untouched, its blackened petals frozen in decay. I rang the bell, and the door opened almost instantly, as if the man inside had been standing just behind it, waiting. He was dressed in a suit, sharp but simple, the kind of expensive that was meant to look effortless. His expression barely shifted as he took the package from my hands. "Right on schedule," he said, and the way he said it made my skin crawl. I hadn't told anyone I was coming. As he took the package, I noticed something on his cuffs, a fine white residue, almost powdery, catching the morning light. It looked like flour, or something else. My phone buzzed again. Final drop confirmed. Payment processing. I exhaled. It was done. The money was in my account. I could walk away. Then another message appeared. "Your GPS shows you haven't left the delivery point. Leave now." A weight settled in my chest, the kind of cold that came from something deeper than fear. I turned and walked quickly back to my car, hands unsteady as I pulled out of the driveway. My breath hitched as my phone vibrated again. And remember, we have your address, your mother's address, your sister's school schedule. We even know about the unreported accident from 3 years ago. You're part of the route now. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. How the hell did they know that? I glanced in the rearview mirror. The house stood silent, the front door still slightly ajar. A sliver of darkness just visible beyond the threshold. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at my bank account balance. $5,000, just like they promised. I could pay everything. The eviction notice could come down. But my attention kept drifting to my sleeve. A single speck of white powder clung to the fabric. I rubbed at it, but it didn't come off. Another text arrived. Tomorrow's route has 3 stops. Don't be late, don't ask questions, and don't think about how easy it would be for another courier to deliver something to your address. Something heavier, something final. A car passed slowly outside. The headlights swept across my walls, casting long shadows that stretched and disappeared. I sat there, unmoving, barely breathing, listening to the sound of the engine idling at the curb. At dawn, another package waited in my mailbox, heavier than yesterday's. When I picked it up, I felt it shift, something loose inside, settling unnaturally. Another route, another set of stops, another step deeper into something I hadn't meant to enter. Paranoia starts small. A feeling, a misplaced object, a moment of hesitation that lingers a little too long. You tell yourself it's nothing, that you're overthinking things, that you're tired. Then it happens again, and again, and eventually you stop telling yourself anything at all. For me, it started with a coffee cup. I had left it at a cafe 2 blocks from my apartment, half full, sitting on the chipped wooden table near the window where I always sat. I remembered walking out without it, distracted by an email on my phone. But when I got home an hour later, there it was. Same cup, same amount of coffee left inside, still warm, sitting on my desk, exactly where I would have placed it if I had brought it back with me. After that, it was the little things. The shower running when I woke up, steam clouding the mirror. Though I lived alone, my laptop warmed to the touch after I'd been gone all day, as if someone had just been using it. My shoes pointed neatly toward the door every morning, though I always kicked them off without thinking. I changed my routine. I took different routes to work, stayed off social media, stopped using my real name on anything. I paid in cash when I could, used burner emails, wiped my devices regularly. But it didn't matter. They were already ahead of me. I found the guide on the dark web. It wasn't listed on any of the usual sites, the ones where people sell fake passports, stolen credentials, and hacked bank accounts. I had to go deeper, searching through locked marketplaces and hidden message boards. The listing was simple: The Art of Invisible Living, 300 XMR, disappear completely. The seller had no reviews, no transaction history, nothing to indicate whether they were real or a scam, but the page had a single line of text beneath the listing. For those who need to vanish, you will be found before you even realize you're looking. I paid without hesitation. The file arrived at midnight, A simple PDF. The first page contained a message. Dear Michael, yes, I know your name. More importantly, I know you're looking to vanish. Let me help you become a ghost. My real name. Not my burner accounts. Not my encrypted email alias. Michael. The guide was thorough. Step-by-step instructions on how to erase my digital footprint, abandon my routines, create false trails. It covered everything. How to wipe metadata from photos, how to use dead drops, how to manipulate paper trails. But as I read, something about the examples felt wrong, too specific. When choosing a new routine, avoid patterns like stopping for coffee at 8:47 a.m., always sitting by the window, ordering a medium dark roast with room for cream. My exact order, my exact timing. Don't be predictable, like checking your rearview mirror exactly 3 times at every red light, or touching the lock twice before leaving your apartment. My habits, my rituals. I felt my stomach drop as I turned the page. It was a floor plan, my building, my unit, emergency exits marked, the broken security camera in the stairwell labeled. I scrolled down. Photos. Me, checking over my shoulder, taking different routes, using a VPN, downloading the guide, each one time-stamped, each one annotated with behavioral notes. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You're reading it now, aren't you? I can see your expression changing as you realize. Chapter 3 is where it gets really interesting. That's where I explain how I wrote this guide specifically for you, Michael, using everything I've learned from studying your attempts to avoid me. My breath caught. I forced myself to keep reading. The thing about wanting to disappear, the next section read, is that you have to be visible first to someone who knows how to watch. I've been teaching you, Michael. Every coffee cup left on your desk, every rearranged paper, every mysterious sound, they were lessons, preparing you for this moment, making you ready for the next chapter. I felt sick. I slammed the laptop shut, ripped the battery out, grabbed my phone and crushed it under my heel. But I knew it wouldn't matter, because I understood now. This wasn't about me learning to disappear. This was about me being recruited. I opened my closet. Everything had been rearranged. Not in a way that was obvious, but in a way that felt wrong. Clothes I never folded were now neatly stacked. Shoes I hadn't worn in weeks were moved forward. And in the center, a single item that hadn't been there before. A burner phone, still powered on. Its screen displayed one word, start. Outside, a van idled beneath my window. The clock read 3:19 a.m., right on schedule. I didn't notice the notification at first. My phone was face down on the desk, vibrating against the wood in a way that barely registered over the hum of my computer. I had been reading a cybersecurity forum, a thread about phishing scams and compromised accounts, something I'd been fixated on lately for no reason I could quite explain. It wasn't until the vibration stopped and my screen dimmed that I glanced over, catching a glimpse of the email preview. Transaction complete. £47,283.91 successfully transferred. The numbers didn't make sense at first. My brain rejected them outright, as if seeing my entire savings vanish in black and white text was some kind of visual glitch. I unlocked my phone and opened my banking app, waiting as it loaded with agonizing slowness, my pulse thudding in my ears. Then it was there, plain as day. My balance was empty. Every last pound drained into an account I didn't recognize. My hands were already moving before I could process it. I dialed the bank, navigated the robotic prompts, and found myself on hold, my grip tightening on the phone as tinny jazz music filled my ear. I stared at the transaction details, willing them to change, feeling an almost out-of-body sensation creeping up my spine. There was no notification of suspicious activity, no fraud alert, just the cold clinical confirmation that my money was gone. Desperation had me searching for solutions before the bank's automated system could direct me to a human. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I remembered reading about a deep recovery service for stolen accounts. I pulled up my browser, typed in the name, and clicked the first result. The website looked professional, with clean fonts, testimonials, and an SSL certificate. Everything a legitimate cybersecurity firm should have. Digital restoration specialists. They claimed to retrieve lost assets, reverse unauthorized transactions, and even erase personal data from leaks. I filled in my information, barely pausing before clicking submit. The page refreshed, and then I saw it. My name, my face, my life, listed for sale. I felt a sharp, sickening lurch in my stomach as I stared at the auction-style interface in front of me. My identity was no longer mine. It was now a product. The listing was detailed, clinical in its dissection of who I was. Complete identity package, fresh acquisition, premium value. Each line item scrolled past like a post-mortem report of my existence. Full bank access, clean credit history, medical records, streaming accounts, social media passwords, even a record of online purchases. Then further down, something that made my breath catch in my throat. Personal writings, including password-protected documents. I blinked rapidly, my vision tunneling, as I realized what that meant. My emails, my cloud storage, my old blog entries from university, my unfinished short stories, even the stupid password-protected Word document where I'd once transcribed childhood diary entries. It was all there, parceled into digestible, purchasable segments of my life. A chat window popped up. There was no name attached to it, just a simple, untraceable number. We see you found your listing. You're a high-value acquisition. My hands hovered over the keyboard, useless, shaking. The price on my listing kept climbing. I could see bids rolling in, each one accompanied by a short comment, a brief justification for why my life was worth a purchase. Excellent psychological profile. Subject demonstrates strong emotional predictability. Multiple unused credit lines. High scam viability. Social engineering potential. High. The words barely registered. A distant horror unfolding in real time while my body remained locked in place, frozen by something deeper than fear. Another message appeared in the chat. The recovery service? That was us. We wait for people like you. People desperate enough to hand us everything. I tried to close the browser. My cursor wouldn't move. The entire screen flickered, and new tabs forced themselves open. My email inbox, my social media accounts, my cloud storage, they were all suddenly active, their contents flooding onto the screen faster than I could process. Messages were being sent that I hadn't written. Friend requests were being accepted from names I didn't recognize. Files I had never seen before were appearing in my folders, alongside my own. Records of other people, other identities that had been stolen before mine. The buzzing of my phone yanked my attention back, and for a moment I thought it was the bank finally calling me back, but it was another unknown number. A text, short and to the point. Your childhood diary entries are particularly valuable. So much insight into your security questions. A cold sweat broke out across my skin. The realization hit me in pieces, each more nauseating than the last. The little details from my past, the names of my first pet, my childhood best friend, my favorite teacher, had been sitting in that document for years, collecting dust. Now they were being used against me. A small green light flickered at the top of my laptop. The built-in camera. I didn't want to look, but I did. My reflection stared back at me in the window, wide-eyed, ghostly in the screen's glow. But then I saw the video feed that had replaced my profile picture on the auction page. It was me, but not just from my laptop. It was a view from my phone, from my TV, from the tiny lens of my security camera in the corner of my room. They had been watching the entire time. I shot up from my chair, reaching to yank the power cable from my laptop, to kill the connection by any means necessary. But then my banking app refreshed. A new deposit. Plus £47,283.91. I stood there, my breath shuddering in my chest, staring at the number that had just reappeared in my account. Below it, a message. Consider this your signing bonus. You're part of the marketplace now. The screen shifted again. A fresh list of new identities for sale appeared. They were just names, no faces, no stories, just people in the exact same position I had been in only minutes ago, staring at their screens in some dimly lit apartment, their own lives crumbling into data points and pound signs, their desperation leading them straight into the trap. A final message blinked into the chat. Start browsing. Someone else's desperation is waiting to become your opportunity. The cursor on my screen hovered over the list of names. My stomach twisted in revulsion, but my hand, my own hand, was trembling over the trackpad, hesitating in a way that terrified me more than anything else. I could still feel the weight of my own stolen life pressing against my chest. But now, in the glow of the screen, I realized something far worse. For the first time since this nightmare started, I wasn't the product anymore. I was the buyer. The first text came while I was eating dinner. A photo of my usual seat at the coffee shop, a block from my apartment. Empty. The timestamp in the corner showed it had been taken an hour earlier. No sender, no context, just the image. I stared at it for a long time, feeling the kind of unease that doesn't hit all at once. It starts as a prickle at the base of your neck, something primal warning you before your rational mind catches up. I hadn't been there today. I hadn't even walked past. The second text arrived while I was brushing my teeth. A screenshot of my bank login page. Cursor hovering over forgot password. By midnight, my phone vibrated so often, it felt like it had a pulse of its own, a steady rhythm, each notification another glimpse into my life through someone else's eyes. A photo of my building's entrance, a time-stamped clip of me unlocking my front door, a close-up of my laptop screen, captured from a camera I didn't know existed. I didn't open them. I didn't reply. I just sat in the dark, my mind cycling through every possible explanation, none of them good. Somewhere between fear and logic, I did the only thing I could think of. I searched for ways to remove my personal data from the internet, clicking through links faster than I could read them. That's when I found it. A forum buried deep in the results, disguised as something technical. Live event. Subject 23-7B. Active. The preview showed my own face. A candid profile shot against the dull October sky, caught mid-step, unaware. It had been running for 3 days. A betting pool, each wager placed on my decisions. The odds were listed in columns, adjusting in real time. 3-1 that I would change my phone number within 24 hours. 5-1 that I would relocate to my parents' house in Cedar Rapids. 8-1 that I would attempt counter-surveillance. 20-1 that I would make it through the week without a panic attack. A user named Oddskeeper was running statistics on me like I was a racehorse. My average heart rate tracked through my fitness app, my sleep cycles pulled from my smart home system, my entire routine broken down into neat, predictable variables. Rolling bets for tonight's dinner choice. The latest post was casual, almost playful. Early money on Thai takeout given subjects historical stress-eating patterns. Note elevated cortisol levels from smartwatch data. I hadn't even thought about food yet. My stomach was a twisted knot, empty but tense, but that didn't seem to matter. They already knew my patterns better than I did. My phone vibrated again. We've got money riding on you. 23-7B. Don't disappoint the house. I scrolled through the thread, my heartbeat slamming against my ribs, cold dread sinking into my limbs. The messages updated in real time, a rapid feed of commentary on my own life. 1942. Behavior analyst. Subject's mouse hovering over deletion options. Tension in shoulder suggests imminent action. 1943. Pattern reader. Wait for it. 1943. Oddskeeper. New market opening. Will subject finally notice the camera in their desk plant? I stopped breathing. The fern on my desk, a forgettable birthday gift, sat in its usual spot. The air in my apartment was still, but one of its leaves trembled ever so slightly. I didn't move. I didn't blink. My hands ached from clenching the phone too hard. 1944. Watcher Prime. Moment of recognition achieved. Initiating next phase. Opening bets on flight versus fight response. The odds shifted in real time, flickering like stock prices. My own terror fueling a system I hadn't even known existed. A private message slid into my inbox. Your cortisol levels are providing excellent volatility for our traders. The shaking hands, the rapid breathing. It's all very good for business. We've made you into a human stock market. 23-7B. Your anxiety is paying dividends. I wanted to throw my phone across the room, but I already knew it wouldn't matter. On screen, new bets rolled in. 2-1 that I would attempt to unplug my devices. 4-1 that I would check the door locks again. 10-1 that I would realize they were already inside my phone's predictive text. 50-1 that I would understand I had been in the game much longer than I thought. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitating before I typed. How long have you been watching? The response came immediately. Longer than you think. Every algorithm you've ever fed, every click, every hesitation. We've been running the numbers on you for years. You are the data. You are the entertainment. I swallowed hard, my throat dry and tight, my ears filled with the rush of my own blood. Outside, a car alarm blared, sharp and sudden. I jumped. The live odds adjusted accordingly. I shut the laptop, turned my phone face down, sat in the dark, heart racing, the weight of something vast and invisible pressing down on me. It didn't matter. The numbers were still running. The players were still watching. The bets were still being placed. And no matter what I did next, they already knew how it would end. The coffee shop felt different at 3 in the morning. The hum of conversation and clinking mugs that usually filled the space had been replaced by something quieter, heavier, the kind of silence that wasn't truly empty, just waiting to be filled. A lone barista wiped down the counter, not looking up, and the only other customers were buried in their screens, their faces lit in soft blue light. I sat in the corner, my laptop open, the glow of the monitor reflecting in the window, turning the darkness outside into a mirror where my own face stared back at me. I had spent the past few weeks trying to get into Privy to Intel, a dark web forum that promised access to classified intelligence, the kind of place where leaks weren't just rumors, but assets, where restricted government documents were treated like currency. The verification process had been brutal. Anonymized credentials, layers of encryption, endless hoops to prove I was more than just some amateur looking for conspiracy theories. I had fabricated an identity with meticulous care, building a digital footprint that suggested I was someone who belonged. When my access was finally approved, I felt the kind of rush I imagined safecrackers got when they heard the final click of a lock giving way. I spent hours combing through documents, redacted reports, procurement records linked to organizations I'd never heard of. It wasn't about what I could do with the information. I had no illusions of selling intelligence or exposing government secrets. It was about having it, about knowing I had seen something I wasn't supposed to, something most people never would. I downloaded everything I could, stuffing my hard drive with pieces of information that felt important, even if I didn't fully understand them. At the time, I didn't stop to wonder where it had all come from, or who had been watching me take it. The first sign that something was wrong came the next morning. A notification from my bank flagged unusual activity. A series of small transactions I hadn't made, each one calculated to stay just under the threshold that would trigger an automated fraud alert. When I tried to log in, my password had been changed. Then my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Phase 1 complete. Your digital signature has been properly established. I stared at the words, my stomach tightening. The phrasing wasn't casual. It wasn't the language of a hacker draining my account. It sounded like a process, a step in something larger. At work, I opened my laptop, trying to shake the feeling, but something felt off. My desktop looked the same, but the arrangement of my icons was wrong, just slightly. My browser history showed sites I hadn't visited. In my list of recently opened files, there were documents I knew I hadn't touched because I had deleted them the night before. I scrolled through the list, pulse hammering. The files weren't just random. They were the same classified documents I had downloaded from Privy 2 Intel, only now they were attached to emails, drafts, ready to be sent. To who? I didn't know. I didn't open them. I just closed the laptop, swallowing hard, feeling the pressure of something I couldn't name settling in my chest. That's when I noticed the security camera in the corner of the office, the one I had never really paid attention to before. The tiny LED light blinked red, recording. It had never been on before. That night, my phone's photo gallery was filled with pictures I hadn't taken, images of my apartment from angles that didn't make sense, corners of the ceiling, low shots from the floor, like someone had been positioning a camera, testing angles. My bed, neatly made, even though I had left it unmade that morning. My front door, captured from the inside, as if someone had stood there, watching it, waiting. In my email drafts, another message had appeared. Clearance level, insufficient. Containment protocols initiated. I slammed my laptop shut, breath coming too fast. This wasn't just hacking. It wasn't someone sitting behind a screen, watching me from a distance. Someone had been inside my apartment. The next day, I called in sick and stayed home. I unplugged my router, removed the battery from my phone, did everything you're supposed to do when you think you're being watched. But paranoia is a strange thing. It makes the silence feel heavier, makes every creak in the walls sound deliberate. By mid-afternoon, my anxiety had settled into something sharper, something closer to certainty. I powered up my laptop, offline, and started combing through my files. Something had been added. A folder that hadn't been there before. A collection of scanned documents, leases, utility bills, employment records, tax filings. My entire life, mapped out in bureaucratic detail. But mixed in were things that didn't belong. Transactions I had never made. Phone records from numbers I didn't recognize. Travel itineraries for flights I had never taken. The timestamps were perfect. The details flawless. They weren't sloppy fabrications. They were evidence. Then I noticed the folder title. Subject profile. Integration Candidate 17. That night, I barely slept. Every noise in the apartment felt amplified. Every passing car, a potential threat. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of something I couldn't shake pressing down on me. At 4:07 a.m., my phone buzzed. I turned it over, hesitating. A single message. Your fabricated credentials have been documented. Your clearance level has been reassigned. Please maintain normal routines while the integration team completes their assessment. I sat up, heart hammering. Someone was in the hallway outside my apartment. Footsteps, measured and deliberate, stopping just past my door. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just listened. No knock, no attempt to enter, just presence. Minutes passed, then more, then silence. By morning, my hand still had a tremor I couldn't shake. My apartment door was locked. Nothing looked disturbed. But the more I tried to convince myself it had been in my head, the more I felt like I'd already lost control of the situation. My phone buzzed again. An email this time. No sender, no subject, just a short message. Your attempts to access restricted information have provided valuable insight on civilian penetration strategies. Your continued cooperation in this ongoing study is appreciated. I reached for my coffee cup, but as I lifted it, I froze. The handle was warm, like someone had been holding it just moments before. That night, I parked my car across the street from my apartment and watched my window from a distance. The blinds were open, the light from my living room casting a dull glow. Everything looked normal. Then the light flickered, and someone moved past the window. I gripped the steering wheel, stomach twisting. I was supposed to be alone. My phone buzzed. Please return home. The transition process requires continued compliance. I looked back at the window. The figure had stopped moving. They were standing still now, perfectly centered, watching the glass, watching me. I couldn't see their face, but I already knew what I would see if they turned around. I put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb, eyes fixed on the road. As I turned the corner, my phone vibrated one last time. Clearance level updated. Subject. I don't know how they got my number. I don't know who they are. All I know is that once your personal information is out there, scattered across the internet like breadcrumbs, leading to your front door, there's no getting it back. At first, it was easy to ignore. A few strange messages from numbers I didn't recognize, mostly garbled nonsense, or what looked like automated spam. Then the calls started, at odd hours of the night, always silent. The only sound was breathing, slow and deliberate, waiting for me to speak first. I never did. And then, as if my reluctance was an invitation, the messages changed. They knew my address, my old passwords. They listed my family members' names as if reading from a file, a casual reminder that they weren't just guessing. Someone had doxed me, dumped my entire existence onto some seedy corner of the web, where anonymity is a weapon, and my life had become their entertainment. I reported it. The police shrugged. My phone provider said there was nothing they could do. The advice was always the same. Change your passwords. Don't engage. Be careful. But it was already too late for that. The damage was done. And so, with no real options left, I did something I never thought I'd do. I went looking for help, in the one place no one should ever go looking for anything. I went to the dark web. Hours blurred together as I scrolled through endless forums, searching for any mention of services that could erase me from the web. Most were scams, promising digital invisibility in exchange for Bitcoin. But buried deep within a thread of paranoid rants and desperate pleas, I found a link, an invite-only forum claiming to specialize in reversing exposure. I clicked. The page loaded slowly, and for a moment, I thought the link was dead. But then, in a flash of dim green text against a black void, the site came to life. It was a message board, old school in its design, and filled with discussions about data breaches, identity wipes, and the people unfortunate enough to need them. I was about to post when I saw something that stopped me cold. A thread with my name in the title. My mouth went dry. It was recent, just minutes old, and the title was a single question. What happens next to, then, my name? Heart pounding, I clicked on it. The first post was simple, a blank statement. Let's take bets. The replies poured in beneath it. User 1783 said, £50 says he calls the police again. Won't help. Ghost host said, he's still online, watching. Hey, wave if you see this. No sleep. 404 commented, £100 that his doorbell rings within the hour. Anon replied, £250 if he picks up the package that just got delivered. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. My eyes flicked toward the front door, and sure enough, there was a package sitting there. Small, black, unmarked. I hadn't ordered anything. This wasn't a joke. I turned back to the screen, fingers hovering uselessly over the keyboard as new messages flooded in. Watcher 99 said, £500 says he opens it. Let's speed this up. A notification buzzed on my phone. A text from an unknown number. Open the box. A lump formed in my throat. My breathing felt too loud in the silence of my apartment. Slowly, I backed away from the desk, resisting the urge to look out the window. They wanted me to panic. They were watching. And then, as if responding to my hesitation, the messages changed. X. Anon. He's stalling. Look at him go. Ghost host. £1,000 says he checks the back door next. Watcher 99. TikTok. Every hair on my body stood on end. I ripped the modem's power cable from the wall, severing my connection in a single violent motion. The screen went black. The room was silent. And then, through the stillness, a single sound. Knocking. The knock. Not the front door. The back door. I stood, frozen, every nerve in my body screaming at me to run, to hide, to do anything other than stand there like a deer in the headlights. But I couldn't move. Another knock. Louder this time. Deliberate. Someone was there. I didn't dare turn my phone back on. Didn't dare check if the thread had updated. My instincts screamed that they were still watching, still typing, still placing their bets on what I'd do next. My pulse hammered in my ears as I crept toward the kitchen, my back pressed against the wall, footsteps slow and measured. The only thing separating me from whoever was outside was a thin barrier of wood, glass. I held my breath, straining to listen. Silence. Then, my phone vibrated violently against the counter. No service, no Wi-Fi, no reason for a message to come through. I hesitated before glancing at the screen. £5,000 if you answer. My hands were shaking. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to think. This was a game to them, a twisted form of entertainment. They wanted me to participate. I powered the phone off. The knocking stopped. For a long moment, I just stood there, the world holding its breath with me. Maybe, just maybe I'd won. Maybe they'd lost interest now that I refused to play. And then, from behind me, a whisper, so close it brushed against my ear, breath warm against my skin. You lost the bet. The package arrived on a Tuesday. No return address, no markings. Just a plain brown cardboard box, sealed hastily with clear packing tape, its edges slightly frayed as if someone had reused it. That wasn't unusual. I'd ordered plenty of these so-called dark web mystery boxes before, feeding the morbid curiosity of my YouTube audience. People loved the idea of peering into the abyss, of opening something curated by faceless strangers from the internet's hidden underbelly. Most of the time, they were filled with predictable junk, discarded personal effects, expired medication, thrift store trinkets deliberately chosen to be unsettling. I'd gotten old home movies on reels I couldn't play, mouldy diaries with the last pages torn out, and once a wedding dress, badly stained and bundled up like something abandoned in a hurry. But this one was different. It was smaller than usual, lighter, not the weight of randomness, but something deliberate, something chosen. I set up my camera, adjusted the lighting, and started cutting through the tape. The box flaps came apart stiffly, edges pressed tight as though they hadn't been opened in years. The first thing that hit me was the smell. Not the usual mustiness of forgotten belongings, but something faintly familiar. Dusty fabric, old paper, and a trace of something I couldn't quite place. Inside, wrapped in a single sheet of newspaper, was a teddy bear. Small, brown, ordinary. Not handmade, not grotesque. Just a toy. I turned it over in my hands, my breath catching in my throat before I fully understood why. The fur was worn in places, slightly matted, the stuffing uneven from years of being held, carried, or more likely, forgotten in the corner of some old storage box. A notch was missing from its left ear, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. A strange sensation washed over me, an uncomfortable familiarity I didn't want to acknowledge. My fingers trailed absent-mindedly over the surface before they landed on something, a faded ink stain. No, not a stain. Initials. My initials. I had this bear when I was a kid. I lost it when I was 7. A slow creeping unease settled in my stomach. This wasn't random. This was mine. And whoever had put it in this dark web box knew it. I set the bear aside, swallowing hard as I reached for the next item, a Polaroid photograph. The film was slightly curled at the edges, the colors faded but still clear enough to see. It was my childhood bedroom, my old bed, My messy desk, the exact wallpaper I remembered from when I was 6. And on the pillow, sitting perfectly upright, was the bear. I turned the photo over. No date, no writing. But I knew when it was taken. I knew because I'd never seen this angle before. This wasn't from a family album. This was taken from my doorway. A pressure built in my chest, but I kept going. The next photo was the same room, slightly different angle, another Polaroid, another impossible shot, then another. My 10th birthday party, but not from inside the house. This was taken through the dining room window. I recognized the decorations, the people. I saw myself, mid-laugh, completely unaware of the lens capturing the moment from outside. I sifted through the stack with growing dread. More photos. More angles I had never seen before. A picture of me riding my bike at 12, taken from across the street. A shot of me sitting in my high school library, hunched over a book. A nighttime image. My bedroom window glowing faintly, my silhouette visible against the curtain. The last photo made my hands shake. It was me, sitting at my desk in my current apartment. The same desk where I was sitting right now. The same position, the same chair. The photo had been taken recently, and I wasn't alone. A figure stood in the shadows, barely visible in the doorway. I dropped the photos, my breath hitching in my chest, a numb terror settling deep in my bones. I wanted to believe it was fake, that someone had doctored these, but the memories they captured were real. These weren't pulled from the internet or copied from old albums. Someone had been watching me. For years. I forced myself to check the last item in the box. A folded note, handwritten on yellowed paper that smelled faintly of old books and something else. Something I couldn't place. We've been keeping these for you. You lose so many things. We hold on to them so they don't disappear forever. My hands felt ice cold. A sharp vibration in my pocket made me jump violently. My phone, a text message. No number, no contact name, just a message. Check your first unboxing video. Every instinct told me not to. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to shut off the camera, to leave, to run. But my fingers moved anyway, navigating to my channel, scrolling all the way back. My very first dark web mystery, box video. Grainy footage, bad lighting, my younger self fumbling through his first real attempt at content. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Then, I saw it. In the background, on the shelf behind me, half hidden, slightly out of focus, but unmistakable. The bear, sitting upright, watching. I scrubbed through the footage, frame by frame. At some point, between cuts, its position changed. The arms had lowered, the head had tilted slightly. I clicked out of the video, my breathing too loud, too uneven. My body felt numb, disconnected. Another text came through. It's been with you longer than you think. I turned off the camera, unplugged it, pulled the SD card and shut my laptop. The bear sat in the open box, right where I had left it, unmoving. I didn't sleep that night. In the morning, when I reached for my keys, something else was sitting on my shelf. Another Polaroid. I picked it up with stiff, shaking fingers. bile rising in my throat. It was me, taken an hour ago, from inside my apartment. I turned my head slowly, a suffocating dread pressing down on my chest. The bear was gone, and another package was on its way. I used to think rock bottom was owing my sister $2,000. Now I know better. It started with a Reddit post. Someone claiming they made £300 a day doing basic data entry work through a dark web marketplace. I'd been learning about cryptocurrency anyway. Who hasn't these days? So accessing the site didn't seem like a big deal. Just another corner of the internet where people who valued privacy did business. The marketplace looked professional enough. Clean interface, escrow system, seller ratings. The listing caught my eye immediately. Data entry associates needed. £30 per hour, flexible hours, immediate start. The seller had a 98% rating across hundreds of reviews. People in the comments raved about getting paid on time, how easy the work was. I messaged them. They responded within minutes. The job was simple. They'd send me spreadsheets with transaction data, and I'd need to enter it into various online banking portals. They said it was for a crypto trading company that needed help processing withdrawals manually due to API limitations. The pay would be in Bitcoin, released from escrow every Friday. They even had a proper onboarding process, made me fill out paperwork, sign an NDA, provide ID verification for tax purposes. Everything seemed legitimate, professional. The first week went smoothly. The work was mind-numbingly boring, copying and pasting numbers, clicking through banking websites. But the money hit my wallet exactly as promised. £1,200 for about 40 hours of work. I could have my sister paid back in 2 weeks. It wasn't until the third week that things started feeling wrong. I noticed patterns in the transaction data. The amounts were always just under £10,000. The recipient names were obviously fake, strings of random letters and numbers. And the banking portals, they weren't major banks. They were smaller credit unions, regional banks, usually in Eastern European countries. I convinced myself it didn't matter. I needed the money. I was just doing data entry. If something wasn't right, that wasn't my problem. Then came the email from my own bank. Unusual account activity, potential involvement in money laundering, account frozen pending investigation. I tried contacting my employer through the marketplace. Their profile had vanished. All those perfect reviews. Gone. The escrow account, holding my latest week's pay, empty. That night, someone knocked on my door at 3 a.m. When I checked through the peephole, I saw 2 people in suits. Before I could process what was happening, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hope you kept copies of those spreadsheets. Would be a shame if authorities thought you were running the operation instead of just being a useful idiot. £50,000 in Bitcoin to the attached wallet address makes this go away. You have 24 hours. I'm writing this from a library computer because they're monitoring everything else. My bank accounts are frozen. My sister won't answer my calls. The police already questioned her. The same 2 people in suits have been parked outside my apartment for 3 days. I owe my sister $2,000. I owe criminals $50,000. And somewhere in the databases of a dozen Eastern European banks, there are records of thousands of transactions in my name. Rock bottom isn't owing money. Rock bottom is realizing you've got no way to prove you're just another victim. Rock bottom is understanding that the evidence doesn't show you were manipulated. It shows you were the manipulator. Rock bottom is knowing that either the police or the criminals are coming for you, and you're not sure which would be worse. It was supposed to be a small change, 1 grade, a minor correction to a system that had already failed me, C+ to B+, just enough to keep my scholarship, to keep my future intact. It wasn't about laziness or dishonesty. It was survival. The difference between staying in school and losing everything. For 2 weeks, I searched through the dark corners of the internet, sifting through whispers in encrypted forums, scanning endless threads buried in the depths of the dark web. That's where I found them. Gradesmaster, a 5-star rating, dozens of testimonials, a reputation for being discreet, efficient, and most importantly, untouchable. Their profile promised guaranteed grade adjustments with methods so seamless that no university system could detect them. The cost was a flat £2,000. Expensive, but far less than the price of losing my scholarship. I scraped together the money, borrowing from 3 friends under different excuses, converting the cash into Bitcoin. The transaction had to be handled precisely. No direct mentions of the request, no unnecessary words, just a cold, methodical exchange of information. My student ID, the course code, proof of enrollment, a faceless confirmation in the encrypted chat. 3 days later, the change was complete. When I checked my transcript, it was as if the original grade had never existed. No red flags, no digital footprints. The B+ sat there, perfectly clean, a quiet rewrite of history. And for a while, that was it. 2 weeks passed. The stress dulled, paranoia faded, and for the first time in months, I could breathe again. My mistake was believing it was over. Then the email arrived. There was no sender name, only an anonymous Proton mail address. The subject line was simple, a reference to my grade change. My stomach knotted as I opened it, scanning the message. No threats, no accusations, just an offer, a business proposition. Attached were screenshots, every message I had sent, every Bitcoin transaction, even a screen recording of the hacker infiltrating the university's system. Each step catalogued with meticulous precision. There was no ambiguity, no room for denial. The evidence was damning. And then the ultimatum. Bank accounts needed to be opened. Identities had to be clean, untouched by fraud or scrutiny. My role was simple. Apply, submit, hand over access. Payment would be deposited directly into my Bitcoin wallet. I stared at the email, heart hammering, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then I deleted it. Seconds later, my phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. I switched to my university email. A draft sat waiting in my outbox, already addressed to the Academic Integrity Board. It was a full confession, complete with every detail, screenshots, transaction records, timestamps. A single click away, from the end of everything. There was no choice. The first identity arrived in a password-protected file, an entire person condensed into forged documents, a social security number, a birth certificate, utility bills, pay stubs, everything flawless, except the name was real. Somewhere, someone was about to lose everything. The process was disturbingly simple. A new email address, a bank application, uploaded documents, a signature, a name added to a system that would swallow it whole, then another, and another. Each submission triggered a new deposit, Bitcoin accumulating in my wallet in numbers I was too afraid to touch. The paranoia was relentless. Every time I walked into a bank, my chest tightened, convinced that some nameless employee would pause, hesitate, catch the lie, that a flicker of recognition in their eyes, the subtle tightening of their grip on a pen, would be the precursor to a quiet request for me to step into a back room. But it never happened. The accounts passed through without question. 6 now. Then, at midnight, another email arrived. A new offer. More clients. Higher pay. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. Each morning, I wake up with the weight of the next task pressing against my skull, dreading the moment my phone vibrates again. Each night, I lie in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if tomorrow is the day they decide I know too much. And every time I log into my university portal, my eyes land on that B+, a single digit and a plus sign, so small, so insignificant. But I know the truth. It wasn't just my grade that changed. It was me. Madison's room always smelled like vanilla and dried roses, a mix of candles and old potpourri. She swore made her space feel less digital. It barely masked the warmth radiating from her gaming PC, the machine that had become an extension of her ever-curious mind. The LED strips behind her monitors pulsed in lazy waves of purple and blue, throwing shifting shadows across our faces as we leaned in, the glow reflecting off our wide, unblinking eyes. She was the kind of person who always found the hidden corners of the internet, the places most people didn't know existed or didn't dare look for. "It's called Echo," she murmured, fingers gliding over her keyboard. "Kenzie at school showed me how to get in." I watched as she navigated through layers of security, clicking through pages that didn't look like much at first. Black backgrounds, lines of dull white text, no branding, no ads, no flashy graphics, just doors within doors, each one requiring a different password, each one timed so that if she hesitated even a second too long, access was denied. Next to me, Rachel picked at the loose threads on her sweater sleeve, a nervous habit she'd had since middle school. The air in the room felt warmer than before, dense with the quiet pressure of something we didn't quite understand yet. The final page loaded with unsettling simplicity, a single text box hovering in the void. Above it, a word, ECHO, and below it, a number, 2,847 active users. "Watch this," Madison whispered, typing her name into the box. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, lines of text, scrolling in real time, conversations, comments, mentions, but not just from public social media. private messages, emails, group chats, texts she had never seen. Some were months old, some from earlier that day. People talking about her. Friends, teachers, strangers, conversations they never expected her to see. Rachel sat up, her sleeve forgotten. Do me next. Madison typed her name. More messages, private group chats dissecting things Rachel had said. A text exchange between her parents debating whether she seemed depressed lately. A guy from our class making a joke about the way she dressed. My stomach clenched. "This isn't real," I said, but my voice sounded thin, weightless. "It's all real," Madison muttered, eyes locked on the screen. Every message leaves a footprint, even deleted ones, even drafts. A new notification popped up in the corner of the screen. User matched. Begin active monitoring. Before I could react, Madison clicked yes. The interface changed, feeding us live updates in real time. We weren't looking at old messages anymore. These were happening now. We saw a girl from Rachel's math class, texting someone about her, how she had bombed today's test. A group chat among boys ranking girls at school. Rachel's mom emailing her dad, wondering why she had been so quiet at dinner. Rachel swallowed hard. "Try yours," she whispered. Madison typed my name. The text appeared instantly. My brother texting his girlfriend about how off I had seemed lately. My parents discussing my future in worried tones over email. My best friend's unsent draft messages. Hesitating over how to tell me she thought I was pushing her away. Another notification. User matched. Begin active monitoring. Madison didn't even ask this time. She clicked. My heart kicked against my ribs as the screen filled with fresh messages. My boss at my weekend job, venting to a co-worker about my performance. A teacher telling another that I seemed distracted lately. A kid I barely knew, making an offhand comment in a group chat about how weird I seemed. And then Rachel pointed at the corner of the screen. The number, it's going up. The active users. 2,850. 3 more people. Watching. I swallowed. Watching what? The next message appeared, but this time, it wasn't about us. It was to us. Echo participants must contribute to maintain access. Begin recording local conversations. For half a second, none of us moved. Then Madison's laptop camera light blinked on. Then Rachel's. Then mine. Our phone microphones activated. Every device in the room. Phones, tablets, laptops. Quietly, silently, listening. The LED glow against the walls felt colder now, casting shadows that stretched unnaturally across our faces. The vanilla scent was thick, suffocating, no longer masking anything. I reached for my phone. The screen was blank. No way to turn it off. "Madison," I said, barely recognizing my own voice. "Turn it off." Her hands hovered over the keyboard, frozen. I don't know how. The number in the corner of the screen ticked up again. 2,851. 2,852. More people joining, watching, listening, and the messages kept coming. More real-time conversations from people we knew. Strangers too. some discussing us, some giving instructions, some simply typing, "We see you." I stood up too fast, knocking into the desk. "Turn it off. Shut it down." Madison's fingers flew across the keyboard, navigating out, closing tabs. She yanked the power cable from the back of the PC. The monitors blinked off, but our phones were still on. My laptop camera light was still glowing. Rachel's mic was still recording. I picked up my phone and held down the power button. The screen flashed, shutting down, but the microphone indicator stayed on. I turned off the Wi-Fi. The indicator stayed on. I removed the battery. The indicator stayed on. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Madison didn't bring up what happened. Neither did Rachel. We all had the same understanding, unspoken between us. No one else could know about Echo. And when I got home, when I finally worked up the nerve to turn my phone back on, the microphone was still on. And the number at the bottom of my screen, 2,853. 2 more, still listening. There's something you should know before I tell you this. You can't undo a decision once it's made. You might think you can. You might convince yourself that a choice is just a passing moment, a thing that fades with time. But some choices don't fade. Some choices stay with you. Carter Williams was the kind of guy everyone trusted. Student council president, debate team captain, straight A student with a flawless reputation. Teachers loved him. Parents praised him. Students admired him. But he was also the kind of guy who knew how to hurt people without ever leaving proof. The kind of guy who made your life hell while flashing a perfect smile for the teachers. 3 years. That's how long it went on. The bruises were always hidden. Ribs, stomach, upper arms. I learned quickly how to lie when the nurse asked if I'd fallen during gym class, how to keep my head down and avoid eye contact. A shove into a locker that looked like an accident. A punch in a crowded hallway no one saw. A whispered threat in class while the teacher wrote on the board, chalk scraping like nails on a chalkboard, drowning out my silent pleas. I tried to tell people, but no one listened. "Carter's a great kid," they'd say. "You must have misunderstood." So I stopped trying. Instead, I did what I always did when life felt unbearable. I went online, not to escape, but to search. For what? I wasn't sure. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just distraction. But when you're desperate enough, you start searching for things you wouldn't normally search for. Terms like revenge, payback, justice. My fingers trembled as I typed, my heart pounding louder than the hum of my computer. And when you know where to look, the internet will show you things you shouldn't see. It was a forum. Simple black background, green text that seemed to pulse against the dark screen. Solutions for the powerless, the header read. A beacon for the desperate. The posts were anonymous, people asking for help with problems they couldn't solve themselves. Some of them, most of them, sounded desperate. I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then, with a shaky breath, I typed out a single sentence. "There's someone who makes my life a living hell." I didn't expect a response, but I got one. I understand your situation completely, the reply read. Carter Williams, 17th Student Council President, star of the debate team, lives at 1487 Maple Drive with his parents and younger sister, allergic to peanuts, volunteers at the animal shelter, to look good on college applications. The accuracy of the details made my skin crawl. I hadn't posted Carter's full name. I hadn't mentioned his family or where he lived. My breath caught as I scrolled down. I can help, they continued. No payment required. But once you accept my assistance, you cannot change your mind. Some solutions are permanent. I stared at those words for a long time. Thought about the bruises, the constant humiliation, the way everyone believed Carter was perfect. Thought about how no one ever saw through his facade, how I was always the one suffering in silence. Then I typed, "Yes." The reply came almost instantly. Confirmation received. Watch the news tomorrow. The next day, Carter wasn't at school. Neither was his family. By lunchtime, whispers filled the halls, murmurs of disbelief, curious glances toward the empty chair in the front row. By the end of the day, the police were at his house. I heard they found the front door slightly open. 4 cups of half-finished coffee sat on the kitchen table, chairs pushed back as if the family had stood up in unison, mid-sentence, and walked out. The house was spotless. No signs of struggle, no signs of anything. They had just vanished. The police interviewed everyone. I watched from my classroom window as they searched the school grounds, their faces grim, voices low and urgent. They found nothing. How could they? Days passed, then weeks. Missing person posters plastered the walls, bright faces slowly fading under the harsh sunlight. Carter's name was still called during roll call for a while, then it wasn't. His debate trophies gathered dust in the display case, a silent reminder of his sudden disappearance. His college acceptance letters arrived at an empty house, their hopeful promises met with silence. And then the forum disappeared, vanished as completely as Carter's family, leaving no trace in my browser history. At first, I thought that was the end of it, until the emails started, always from impossible addresses, always the same message. Carter Williams continues his education in a place where power dynamics have been adjusted. His family provides context for his ongoing lesson in empathy. They are learning together. The curriculum is quite intensive. Would you like to view their progress? I never replied, never clicked the attachments, but I knew what they were. And then the little things started happening. Books slightly out of place. My chair turned at a different angle when I got home. My window opened just a fraction, even though I never opened it. My phone buzzing with anonymous texts, untraceable, unreadable strings of characters that felt more like a taunt than a message. Someone had been here. Someone had been inside my room, watching, waiting. Carter's house still stands, untouched. His mother's garden is overgrown, wildflowers creeping through the cracks in the sidewalk. His father's car sits in the driveway, tires slowly deflating, the metal rusting in the rain. His sister's bedroom window is dark, curtains drawn tight, as if waiting for someone to come back. But no one will, because some choices don't fade. Some choices stay with you.